from the day we were born, right? And the doctor said it's a boy, right? To my mom, we've just been told all these lies forever and ever. And one is the gender binary, right? So just because someone, for all practical purposes, looks like a guy doesn't mean that they're not transgender, and inside, they're a trans woman, right?
My name is Danny Pomploon, and this is the Seeker and Sage podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Wow, what a great episode we have for everyone today. I had the honor of talking to my good friend, Michelle. Now, there's been a lot of talk about another podcast that did this show that was very not kind to other members of the LGBTQ plus community. And so I thought I wanted to do something to help educate everyone and share other voices. Now, Michelle is a woman of trans, how she identifies, and she was brave and kind enough to share her story, to share her voice, and talk about what she's up to and how she uses the gifts of yoga to give back in the world. It was an absolute dream and a pleasure to have her on the show. And Michelle, I know you're listening to this. Thank you so much for again, lending your voice so that we can all uplift and continue to learn. Please don't forget to share the show with your friends and leave us a review on iTunes. And without further ado, let's let Michelle take it over. Hey, Michelle, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm losing my mind a little bit in the best way possible. I'm in the middle of opening a brand new yoga studio in San Francisco. So, I've got my plate full.
And yeah, in fact, I saw that. So that's really cool, right?
I'm super excited. I know that the community for sure is, really hungry for reconnection after this, last year. Well, it's been a little over a year now where we haven't been in studio and connecting. So I'm really excited. You know me, I'm always trying to bring the people together to do something. So This is right up my alley.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to have you on the show because this will be the first time I've had this perspective and this lens. And, as we move into the conversation, something that I was sharing, offline was this past Friday, I gave a talk for Yoga Alliance, and it was just a 1-hour webinar. And what I ended up speaking about was, LGBT plus community and how to make things very inclusive. Or how to make things more inclusive and just things to kind of consider and to keep in mind. And I gave it definitely from my lens of, a queer cisgendered man that has operated in the world as I have. And I realized at the end of the conversation, I was like, wow, there was we started it off with like, hey, I'm going to do my best. And, people were in the comments just like supporting and being like, try this or try that, or, just different things. And it was so cool. And I think a lot of this is coming from, as I get to open this space, how do I really, truly, not just say that we're diverse and inclusive, but how do I actually walk the walk? And like, what is it that these different communities need and how can we, best support them? So I think a great place to start would just be your journey. We met through yoga, and I guess I would love to hear just, your journey as a person.
Yeah. So, I guess we should start off right. First of all, I'm trans, and that gives me a unique lens. And among trans people, my life experience has been very unique because I didn't know that I was trans till I was 56. I mean, I was literally 56 years old when it suddenly hit me in the side of the head. Oh my God, I'm trans. Now what am I going to do? Right. And, and fortunately, I had been doing yoga for the last, like 5 years previous to that. In fact, I had taken yoga teacher training not to learn how to teach yoga. That was never my intent. I was struggling with who I was, and I knew, that it was with a Baron Baptiste affiliate in Dallas, and I knew that that going through a Baptiste teacher training would give me tools to figure out life, and it was a beautiful experience. So this safe container that they created for me, of being able to talk about I don't even want to call it at that time really gender dysphoria. It was just confusion. I was in this, inside of me, there was this battle going on, right? So another thing you may not know about me, I'm an engineer by day, and so the very logical, and I work for a defense company, and it's very conservative, and I was living in Dallas. And so that had been my life.
That's a recipe.
That had been my life for 56 years. And now all of a sudden this stuff started rising up. And, and at first it was just, an attraction to wearing women's clothes. I didn't know where it came from. And I thought, well, it's just a fetish. It'll pass. And it didn't, right? And it ended up, well, my marriage fell apart as a result of that, because my ex couldn't deal with that, and I certainly understand that, and never, there's no blame there. So I was this self-proclaimed cross-dresser who was now pushing the envelope to see how far I could go, and not alarm my fellow employees at my very conservative workplace, right? And so I took yoga. I started doing yoga during my divorce to kind of just relax and deal with the stress. And then it became a serious practice. And then it became, oh my God, I need to figure out who I am. And again, back to that. So environment of my teacher training. So all of these, they were all women except for one, typical yoga makeup, right? And they were so supportive of me. I mean, it was incredible. And so that was kind of my first experience, exposing, if you will, this secret. And so not long after teacher training was when this revelation hit me in the head, right? Oh my God, I'm trans. Okay. My world's going to fall apart. I'm going to get fired. My kids are going to run away from me, my sibling, all of the fears that come to you, especially as a trans person. And I guess, I don't know if you remember when you first came out to everyone that you were gay, whether it was young or old, but there's certainly a lot of fear involved in that. A lot of fear, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just not knowing. I grew up in a very Mexican household that was my dad was very. It's just the machismo thing. It's kind of the thing, and they didn't get it, and I didn't know. I was very confused. I mean, I knew. I just was scared. It was a very lonely feeling. Holding that in, bottling it up, and yeah, it was just like you said, there was fear and then some.
Fear and then some, right? Yeah. And so now I had a decision to make, right? I had done all of this work, finally figured out who I am. Do I just stay in the closet and play it safe? Or do I walk, into these fears and take them on? And well, as you can tell, I decided to walk into the fears, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and so I walked into them one by one by one, and as it turned out, they were all just fears. They were all stories that I had made up in my head, and none of them turned out to
Mhm.
be true. I mean, none of them turned out to be true. Even my work um, peers, as well as the management and everyone, they've been so supportive. It's been incredible, um, beyond my wildest dreams. And so once I, established my, um, well, I guess walked through these fears and settled those down. Um, I turned myself, I started feeling compelled to give back, right? Because I
Mhm.
know, right? I mean, and I transitioned and I did all the medical things and all of that, and it all went, flawlessly.
Mhm.
And I know because of my privilege, number one, white. Um,
Yeah.
Number two, very gainfully employed. So I have financial access to everything. Um,
Mm.
and I can just walk away, if it ever got too much. And I know many, if not most, trans people just don't have that privilege, right? They can't just turn it off and walk away. Um, and so I became committed, um, to doing, whatever I could to help the community. So I've been, involved with Off the Mat, doing all my, training, and um, I think I told you I taught yoga for a bit, to the trans women in the San Francisco jail. Right, I did that for about 3 years,
Wow, that's got to be an
and
experience.
so I'm just trying right now to figure out, what I can bring. And the reason I'm, we, as I said offline, I'm moving to Florida next week, um, is because I'm retiring, right? And so I can do that. I can walk away from work and live comfortably, with my pension and all of that, and begin to focus, 100% of my energy on what can I do to make this world safer, so that trans people that come behind me, um, aren't facing the brutal oppression that's taking place, right? I mean, you see it, in these trans bills that are coming up, right? Denying medical care. I mean,
Mhm.
it's horrible. It's actually sickening, that politicians will trade trans lives for a vote. That's simply what it is. They
Mhm.
don't care, and they're fine if they commit suicide. They're fine, if they have to sell their bodies on the street to survive. That's okay with them,
Mhm.
as long as they get that vote. And it's
Yeah.
so anyway. So that's kind of my story. So that's where I am right now. And so I have learned.
I think
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Um, so I've learned a lot, right? So the bulk of my life, I've been working, as this white collar engineer, corporate America, all of that. And then, you know, at 56, right, the universe said, okay, let's see how you handle this.
Mhm.
Um, and so I still, right now, spend most of my time in corporate America surrounded by other, um, straight cisgender people. And
Mhm.
and so I get to give like a daily lesson to them on what it's like to be trans and how beautiful it is. And for me, it's been beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
but I haven't really spent much time out in the community. I mean, I do have friends, and I try to, and and I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. But I will say that as we talk about what it means to be in a safe space and to feel safe is different for me. You have to really go out of your way to trigger me and set me off, just because that's where I am in my life. Whereas if you talk about a trans person that knew they were trans since they were young, has been teased their entire life, has struggled just to get by, it only takes just a little bit, to trigger them and set them off. And so I will never understand that, but I see it and I know it. And in communicating with people in my community, it's real. It's real. And so let me give you an example. There's another yoga teacher who I met through Sean Korn, and we were having this discussion. And so he's a trans man, and and he's made it his mission to educate yoga teachers on what it can be to trigger a trans person. So when he gave me this example, it just like blew me away. He said, if you're a yoga teacher, at the end of class, and you say, everyone, roll to your right, and as you're coming up out of savasana. But for you girls, if you're pregnant, lean over to your left. Well, think about that a minute. What if you're a man and you're pregnant? Right?
Right. Yeah.
And so a yoga teacher would never think about that. But because he's so sensitized, it just, a yoga cue like that will just set him off.
Yeah, I think for, kind of in first, I want to acknowledge like your story and, coming on and sharing that I think is super important, because someone that may be listening to this that may be new to hearing a trans voice, or someone that might be questioning or whatever it is, they have, maybe another touch point that they can listen to or be elevated in. There are lots of yoga teachers that listen to this show, and there's also a decent amount of yoga practitioners that kind of is somewhere in the middle. And one of the things that I was thinking about, is the language that we use in class when it's specific to gender, just how harming it can be. Something as simple as using the word guys can be triggering to a lot of people. So and that was one of the big ones for me. I remember this was a few years back where I had a student, come up and say, I actually don't appreciate that you say guys, because not all of us are guys in here. And I got defensive. Instead of listening, I just didn't know better. I was like, well, if you come into my class, it's always welcoming. And I wasn't getting it. I wasn't hearing the message. It wasn't until later on where I got a little more education under my belt and really started to dive into queer studies and, jump into the alphabet mafia a little bit more, as we call it. And something as simple, I think about how we can make classes a little more inclusive, or at least throw out the flags that we're trying or that we're learning, and it's something as simple as adding, your pronouns on Zoom when you're teaching a Zoom class, or walking into a class and saying, hey, everyone, my name is Danny, he, him. Today we're going to be going over this, this, and this. And that just gives that little permission. And also, throwing out pronouns is something that not just trans people should do, but it should be normalized for everyone to do. I think about, like you just said, I follow Danny the trans dad on Instagram. He's super fun and super awesome. And, that was one of the things that he he advocates for is just the lack of representation, in a lot of areas in his life, whether it's just really just everything, because there is a lack of representation. So from your experience being, both a yoga teacher and, yoga student practitioner, and even someone that's, not only both of those, but you're really just like, you're a warrior out there. You are doing the work and then some. What are things from your, like, for the students and the teachers listening in right now? That Q1 is awesome. What are other things that we could look for to really help us, start to normalize and to see the different lens?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll just, as I went into the community, right, not just the jail, but, the trans communities, in the Bay Area, um, I learned pretty quickly just to not make assumptions, right? A trans woman, um, you know, we're just trained, right? We're from the day from the day we were born, right? And the doctor said it's a boy, right? To my mom, we've just been told all these lies forever and ever. And one is the gender binary, right? So just because someone, for all practical purposes, looks like a guy doesn't mean that they're not transgender, and inside, are they're a trans woman, right? Irregardless of how they present, right? And we can't judge that, right? It could be they present as a man because they can't afford to do anything else. It could be they like the shock value. It could be, who knows, right? And it's not for us to judge. And so, just getting used to the fact that that cover of that book has no relationship to the guts of the book, is a hard lesson to learn. Is a hard lesson to learn, right? And just realizing how much of our language, and yeah, you see a guy, you will call him he, right? But when you do that, you're making an assumption. You're making an assumption, and and if you're trying to, attract people from the trans community, you just have to stop it. Just stop it, and maybe someday we will not have gender pronouns, right? Everyone will be a they, right? Which is, of course, really hard, right? Um, but conceptually, that that's probably um, the way to do the least harm, right? Is never call out a pronoun, a gender pronoun, and because you'll inevitably make a mistake, and we're all human, but that was one of the things that I learned, is that um, this whole gender identity truly is decoupled um, with how a person presents. And yeah, so that is definitely one thing that I would emphasize, is just don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions, because there's a saying, right, about an ass and you and me, right? But
Right. Yeah, totally.
um, and it's truly applicable when you're trying to when you're talking about the trans community, because the variation, I mean, you just see, and it's actually beautiful when you stop and just look at it, right? At first, coming from this very binary world, cis binary world, I was taken aback by it. But when you actually take a look and you just see the beauty, right? The courage, and um, in our world today to actually come out as trans, um, that person has done a lot of work, right? Just to get to that place, to admit to another human, I'm trans. So much work went into that. So much work. And it's just beautiful to watch it. Yeah. I mean, I tell people from my experience, that being trans is, I would say, the most beautiful gift a human being can be granted, period. And I know a lot of other trans people wouldn't agree with me just because of all the oppression that they've suffered. But that's not on them, right? That's upon the rest of the world, right? And another thing that I appreciate, I guess, kind of along the same lines is, and so I'll talk about myself, right? So,
Sure.
Once you admit you're trans, the world actually almost demands that you declare a gender binary, right? Are you man? Are you a man, or are you male or female, right? Well, the answer for most people, well, I'm somewhere in between. And but the reality is, our world, our society forces us to make a decision, right? And as I look back, I am sure, that I went to the full female extreme, right, of going through the surgeries and dressing and and doing the voice and all, because society really wanted, that's if I'm going to be a woman, that's what they want me to be, right? And so in my mind, I can't necessarily, someday maybe, but how much of that was truly how I felt, or how much pressure society put on me to go there, right? If the world was truly welcoming, where would I have ended up on that spectrum? I don't know. I'll never be able to answer that question. But just to think about that a minute, right? In that, as a trans person is basically swimming upstream within our culture, and until the culture changes, that's always going to be the case, and that's just a slow process. So, um, yeah. Am I helping you? Am I providing some kind of insight?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, really, even just, sitting back and listening is so important for a lot of us, so that we have a perspective and a lens that is not ours. A thing that comes up a lot is, I obviously cannot speak for a trans person, but what I do invite everybody out there is that, if you're a yoga teacher or even a yoga practitioner and a friend invites you in, that's what I call that. It's not a coming out. We've been oppressed long enough, but a welcoming into their lives.
Yeah, that's
You
beautiful.
sit, yeah. If someone welcomes you in, then you listen, you support, and that is it. You listen. The best thing that you can do for someone is to be a witness to their being and their healing. You don't have to shift. You don't have to change. You don't even get to pry. If they want to share more information with you, great. All you can, like, the best thing that I always recommend is, like, show up and say, "How can I support you?"
Right.
And listen. That is the best thing that we can do.
Yeah. I mean, as yoga teachers, we're taught to hold that container, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hold the container and not judge, and just be the witness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true. It's so true for trans people, because they are on the edge. They are being oppressed every single day of their lives. And it's hard. It's hard, I think, for many trans people, and I'm going to speak for them, not for me, because I just grew up different, right? So I'm the exception to
Sure.
many cases. But trust, right? I mean, that's what you're doing in creating a space, right? Is trust.
Mm-hmm.
And trans people, trust is a foreign word.
Mm.
How, what can you do to create that trust? Um, and and as you said, I think it's just being open and listening, and being sensitive that they're going to be sensitive, right? They're going to be sensitive. Um, it's just difficult for many trans people to go out into a non-trans space and feel comfortable.
It's part of my mission really in this new space to make it as welcoming as possible to as many people as possible. And so, part of the groundwork that I'm doing is actually just stepping into those communities and not asking them to come to me, but really like trying to step into those communities and be like, what is it that I can do? And how can we make these, mutual agreements even before someone even walks into the space? Like, how can I even create the experience of getting to me more welcoming? So I appreciate your voice and sharing your experience, as I think it's valuable for not just me, but everyone listening.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I we've got a lot of work to do, right? And so I applaud you in stepping up to this challenge. And I just I wish everyone had the same had the same conviction, because uh, it's past time. It's past time, right? And as I said, the once you're connected to a trans person and they open up to you, you will see the beauty, and uh, it's unique, and you know there is so much that they can bring to our world if we let them in and
Yeah,
establish that trust.
that's right.
Yeah.
There's a beauty beyond. I agree. I am so thankful for people like you that have let me into their lives, because it has created just this vast world of expansion in my mind. Like, there's so much more possibility. There's so much more room for love. There's so much more room for creativity. There's more room for self-expression. There's more room for others. It's incredible. It's incredible when someone invites you in. So thank you for, Michelle, on and off air. I adore you. I think you are an incredible human being. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to get to know you over these years, and to sit down and have this conversation with you today. It means a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, when you gave me this offer, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, Um, well, just because you're just this beautiful soul, and to be able to, and you attract beautiful people, and so to be able to take my message and connect to the beautiful people that you attract was just like, something I just had to do. And so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate your time. And yeah, until the next Seeker and Sage.